My best friend recently divorced her husband, and her life took a twisted turn. I never expected I'd want to pull her out of it, but my husband won't let me. I'm 40, female, and my best friend is 38, female. She is going through a divorce with her husband, 44, male. We'll call them Alice and Ken. My husband, 37, male, and I have been together for 10 years, and we've always been close with Ken and Alice. Alice and I have been friends since long before we met our partners. We met in college, sharing dorm rooms and countless late-night study sessions that turned into deep conversations and laughter. We saw each other through bad breakups, celebrated each other's achievements, and even traveled together before life got complicated with jobs and families. Alice was my maid of honor, and I was hers. Our bond has always been unbreakable. My husband and Ken became good friends over the years too. They initially bonded over their shared love of sports and quickly found more common ground. Ken, a tradesman who works out of his metal shop on their property, and my husband, a tech guy who loves to tinker with gadgets, often spend hours in Ken's shop sharing beers and swapping stories about work and life. They hung out just the two of them semi-frequently, enjoying activities that ranged from fishing trips to helping each other with home improvement projects. Alice has a daughter, a bright 12-year-old from her previous relationship, who became a part of our extended family. Ken has been her dad since she was 4, and it was clear he adored her as his own. My husband and I have always treated her like a niece, often including her in our outings and holiday celebrations. About a month ago, Ken told Alice he wanted a divorce. When Alice told me, she was devastated, and I could see the pain in her eyes. She confessed that for the last 6 months, their marriage had been on rocky ground. According to her, the problem stemmed from Ken's issues with her job. 3 years ago, Alice accepted a promotion at her company, a big step up that came with significant responsibilities. This promotion required her to travel 3 to 4 months out of the year, and even when she wasn't on assignment, she worked a lot. Late nights, early mornings, weekends. It seemed like she was always on the clock. She had always been insanely ambitious and successful, climbing the corporate ladder with an impressive determination that I've admired for years. Ken, on the other hand, is a skilled tradesman who works full-time out of his metal shop on their property. His work is demanding too, but in a different way. He stays busy with projects, clients, and managing his own business. Despite his hard work, Alice's income had surpassed his, although I wouldn't call her the breadwinner. They both contributed significantly to their household, but the dynamics had shifted. Alice told me that Ken had been increasingly vocal about his dissatisfaction with her job. He felt neglected, like their relationship was taking a back seat to her career. He had asked her multiple times to either take a position that required less travel and responsibility or find a new job altogether. She had always promised to consider it but had been putting it off, hoping he would eventually drop the subject. This ongoing conflict created a rift between them that widened over time. The situation reached a boiling point when Alice extended a business trip without consulting Ken. She had forgotten about a family vacation they had planned for when she got back. Her priorities seemed clear to Ken, and he felt like he was being pushed aside. When she returned home from the extended trip, she found that Ken had packed his belongings and moved most of his shop and tools into storage. He hadn't given her any indication that he was planning to leave, acting like everything was fine until that moment. She called me when she found out. When I answered the phone, Alice was crushed. She kept saying, "I didn't think he'd do it," over and over. The sadness she initially felt quickly turned to anger when Ken made it clear that there was no chance of getting back together. He had reached his limit, feeling that Alice had checked out of their relationship ever since she took the new position. He believed they no longer did anything as a family, that Alice didn't make time for them to talk when she traveled, and that she prioritized socializing with coworkers over him. Their sex life had dwindled to nothing, and every time he voiced his concerns, she blew him off. Ken's resentment had been building up for a long time, and the extended business trip was the last straw. He felt ignored, unloved, and unappreciated. Alice's ambition and success, traits that once drew them together, were now driving them apart. As Alice recounted all of this to me, I could sense her frustration. She felt torn between her career, which she was passionate about, and her marriage, which was falling apart. She didn't want to choose between them, but it seemed like Ken had already made the choice for her. Everything became much worse after a particular incident, which was hard to even talk about without cringing. Ken and Alice had been separated for about 3 weeks. Their daughter was bouncing back and forth between Ken's apartment and their old home, where Alice was staying. It was Ken's weekend with their daughter, and he typically brought her back on Sunday evenings. Well, Alice went on a bender and literally forgot what day it was. She was so drunk she thought it was Saturday, but it was actually Sunday. Ken shows up with their daughter and walks in on a complete disaster. Alice had 2 younger men there. They were drunk and in the hot tub. They weren't engaged in anything inappropriate, but it was clear what was going on. The scene was chaotic. Empty bottles scattered around, clothes strewn haphazardly, and Alice, visibly intoxicated, was barely coherent when Ken walked in. Alice started freaking out. She began calling Ken names and screaming that it wasn't Sunday yet. Her words were slurred, and her movements were unsteady. The younger men looked uncomfortable and started gathering their things to leave. Ken, trying to keep his composure, quickly escorted their daughter back to his truck so she didn't see the worst of it. He was furious but kept calm for their daughter's sake. Alice's outburst didn't stop. She kept yelling obscenities and accusations, completely oblivious to the actual day. Ken managed to get their daughter out of there without her witnessing too much, but the damage was done. The next day, Alice had no recollection of what had happened. She woke up with a hangover and a hazy memory of the night before. She had texted Ken horrible things while she was intoxicated. The messages were deeply personal and hurtful. Ken showed the text to my husband, who then showed them to me. I won't repeat word for word what they said, but they were really personal, the kind of things that cut deep and are hard to forget. Alice's drunken texts accused Ken of being a failure, of never loving her, and she even made derogatory remarks about his manhood. It was as if all her pent-up anger and frustration had been unleashed in a barrage of venomous words. Seeing those texts broke my heart. This wasn't the Alice I knew. She was spiraling, and it was affecting everyone around her. The incident was a tipping point for Ken. He decided to go all in, determined to take her to the cleaners. He wanted the house, full custody of their daughter, and child support. He wasn't just angry, he was done. For Alice, the realization of what she had done hit hard. She tried to apologize, but the damage was irreparable. Ken was adamant that there was no going back. Their daughter, caught in the middle of all this chaos, started preferring to stay with Ken, feeling more stable and secure with him. I know this isn't the Alice I've known all these years. She's going through a lot, and she needs friends right now. And right now, I'm literally all she has. Alice's actions that night were a manifestation of her inner turmoil, a desperate cry for help, masked by alcohol and poor decisions. It was a moment of weakness with severe repercussions, rippling through the lives of everyone involved. Her own daughter would rather stay with Ken. But I'm not going to cut my best friend out over this. The issue is, my husband wants me to cut her out. He said some really harsh things about her, called her a bad mother, accused her of being self-absorbed. He says he doesn't want me getting sucked into her drama and behavior. Every time I insist that she'll turn it around and just needs help right now, he shuts it down, saying that this is who she really is and that he doesn't know why I'd want to associate with someone like her. I know a lot of this comes from what Ken has told him, and I get that he's defending his friend. They've been close for years, and I understand his loyalty. But it's different for me. Alice and I have a history that goes way back, before either of us met our husbands. I'm not excusing her behavior, but I think it's unreasonable for him to want me to cut my best friend out of my life entirely. Alice has asked me to meet up a few times recently. She's lonely and going through a really tough time. I went once without telling my husband because I knew how he'd react, and honestly, I just wanted to talk to her in person to see if I could help her somehow. When I finally told him we'd met up, he went ballistic. He accused me of hiding things from him, which, okay, I did, but only because I knew he wouldn't understand. He repeated that if I don't cut her out, we'll have issues too. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand, and I'm stuck in the middle. On one side, there's my husband, who's been my rock for a decade, the person I share my life with. On the other side, there's Alice, my best friend, who's like a sister to me. Cutting her out feels like betraying a part of myself, a part of my past, and everything we've been through. To update you, this is not a happy update. Alice and I arranged to meet on Saturday morning. I plan to bring coffee and assist her with some tasks around her house before her business trip on Monday. My goal was to express our collective concern, hers and mine, about her well-being and to let her know we all want her to be happy. Though her recent behavior has been troubling, I hoped we could have a sincere conversation and that I'd reconnect with a friend I knew. I hoped she'd agree to seek therapy and start moving in a positive direction. None of that happened. She was combative from the second I showed up at her place, almost like she knew what my intentions were before I even said anything. Her defensive posture and curt tone were immediate red flags. When I told her I was worried about her, she brushed it off, insisting that she was fine and just blowing off steam, having some fun. She claimed that after all her hard work, she deserved to let loose, especially now that Ken had left her. Her defiance was palpable. She talked about how ungrateful Ken had been over the years, despite all her hard work and the financial support she provided. She listed everything she'd paid for and done for him, framing herself as the martyr in their relationship. It made me cringe to hear her speak this way because it was so out of character. She had always been the strong, independent one, but now it felt like she was rewriting their history to fit her narrative. For the record, Ken is a hardworking guy who didn't need her money. He was the breadwinner when they first got together, supporting Alice as she climbed the corporate ladder. While it's true that she makes quite a bit more than him now, in no way was he ever financially dependent on her. They had always maintained a partnership based on mutual respect and shared responsibilities. Listening to Alice, it was clear she was trying to rationalize her recent behavior, painting herself as the victim who had been taken for granted. But I knew better. Ken had supported her through thick and thin, standing by her side as she pursued her career ambitions. Her current perspective was skewed by the pain and anger of their separation. Alice's demeanor didn't change as I tried to reason with her. Every attempt I made to bring the conversation back to her well-being was met with more justifications for her actions. She was adamant that she was just having fun and that she deserved it after everything she had been through. It was as if she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. Her combative attitude left me at a loss. Some of my friends pointed out it was likely Alice was cheating on Ken. Reluctantly, I asked her about it. She got extremely defensive, her face flushing with a mix of anger and hurt. She gave me the whole "I can't believe you'd even ask me that" attitude, her voice rising in indignation. Her reaction was immediate and intense, as if the very suggestion was an unforgivable betrayal on my part. I reminded her about the hot tub incident and how bad it looked, Ken walking in with their daughter while she was in the hot tub with two younger men, visibly intoxicated. The scene had scandal written all over it, but Alice blew it off, swearing she'd never cheated. She insisted that nothing inappropriate had happened, that it was just a night of harmless fun. When I pressed further and asked who the guys were, she admitted they were interns at her company. Her admission came with a nonchalant shrug, as if it was no big deal. I could feel my stomach turn as I asked how old they were. Her response, "They were legal." The way she said it made me shudder. There was a cold and dismissive tone that sounded more like something a man would say about younger women. It was gross and unsettling. Her flipping attitude didn't sit right with me. I could sense she was trying to downplay the whole situation, to brush it off as inconsequential. But the casualness with which she referred to these interns, combined with the scene Ken had walked in on, painted a troubling picture. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she was letting on. Whether or not she was cheating before the breakup, I don't know. I don't really know anything about this woman anymore. The friend I had known for years, who was once reliable and grounded, now seemed like a stranger. Her actions, her words, and her entire demeanor were so far removed from the Alice I used to know. It was as if she had become someone else entirely, someone I couldn't recognize or understand. This whole ordeal had put me in a difficult position. I wanted to support her, to help her through this rough patch, but her behavior was making it increasingly hard. Here's where things took an unexpected turn. As we chatted, she was packing for her business trip. I asked her where she was going this time. She said Dallas. I didn't think much of it. She had gone to Dallas for business dozens of times. But what struck me as odd was what she was packing: long pants, sweatshirts, a beanie, jackets, hiking boots. It was all fall attire, and not what she'd be wearing in Dallas this time of year. The weather in Dallas was still warm, so her choice of clothing made no sense. I don't think I even saw her pack any work clothes, which was even more puzzling given the purpose of her trip. But the weirdest thing? A random Seattle Mariners jersey. Alice doesn't follow baseball. She never has. Seeing that jersey among her things made my mind race with questions. Why would she need a baseball jersey for a business trip to Dallas? The more I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. I wanted to ask her about it to get to the bottom of this odd packing list, but I kept my questions to myself. I didn't want to seem intrusive or accusatory, especially given how defensive she had been lately. Despite my growing unease, I tried to stay positive. Alice seemed preoccupied with her packing, her movements hurried and almost frantic. Her daughter was coming over soon, adding to the sense of urgency in the room. I decided it was best to leave her to it, not wanting to add to her stress. We hugged before I left. I told her I loved her and that I wanted her to be happy. I emphasized that I hoped she would consider seeing a therapist when she got back from her trip. She looked at me with a mix of emotions and said, "I'll think about it." It was a small concession, but I clung to it, hoping it might lead to something positive. As I walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The bizarre packing choices, the evasive answers, everything felt wrong, but I didn't push it. I wanted to trust that Alice knew what she was doing, even though my gut told me otherwise. When I got home, my husband and I sat down to talk about how things went with Alice. I told him about the clothes she was packing: long pants, sweatshirts, a beanie, jackets, and hiking boots, and the random Seattle Mariners jersey. He thought it was odd too. We both found it strange, but other than it just being odd, we didn't think much of it at the time. But then my husband went full internet detective. He was determined to figure out what was going on. After a bit of searching, he discovered something that made my heart sink. Guess who lives in Seattle and has a Facebook profile picture of himself at a Mariners game? Her daughter's biological father. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. When I checked the Mariners schedule, I saw they'd have home games next week. I called Alice immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. When she picked up, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Are you really going to Dallas?" I asked. She responded casually, "Yeah, why?" I took a deep breath and pressed on. "Are you sure you're not going to see your ex in Seattle?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, probably a full minute of silence that felt like an eternity. I could feel the tension mounting. "Alice, you better not lie to me." "I'll find out," I warned her. Finally, she came clean. She admitted that she had gotten in contact with him right after Ken left her, and that they'd been talking more and more. She claimed he was a different man now, that he had turned his life around, that he was more responsible and stable now, and that he wanted to be a part of his daughter's life again. But all I heard was, blah blah blah. I was furious and heartbroken. This man had caused her so much pain in the past, and now she was letting him back into her life? After everything she had been through with Ken, the last thing she needed was to get involved with someone who had hurt her so deeply before. The fact that she had lied to me, that she had planned this whole trip under false pretenses, made it even worse. I didn't know what to say. I was filled with a mix of anger, disappointment, and fear for what this could mean for her and her daughter. I didn't talk about her baby daddy in the last post because it wasn't relevant, but just know this. This man is a piece of work. He cheated on her while she was pregnant and kicked her out when she confronted him. He would slap her around, call her terrible names, and degrade her in ways that no one should ever have to endure. This guy even had the audacity to say he wanted nothing to do with their child when she finally reached out to him, desperate and broken. I didn't hesitate. I flew to Seattle, picked her up, and brought her home. She stayed with me for a bit, trying to piece her life back together. Those days were tough. Alice was a shell of herself, dealing with the trauma of abuse and the daunting task of raising a newborn alone. But Alice, being the resilient woman she is, slowly started to rebuild. She found strength in her daughter, who became her beacon of hope. Not long after moving in with me, she met Ken. He was a breath of fresh air, a kind, hard-working man who treated her with the respect and love she so desperately needed. Within a year of dating, they moved in together, and Ken embraced the role of a father to her daughter with open arms. He provided stability and affection, something Alice hadn't experienced in a long time. Ken was there for the milestones, her daughter's first steps, first words, and first day of school. He was the one who stayed up all night when she had a fever, who taught her how to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories. In every sense that mattered, he was her father. Their little family seemed perfect, a stark contrast to the nightmare Alice had escaped. Thinking back to those days is painful. It's hard to see how far things have fallen apart. Alice went from being in a loving, supportive relationship to the mess she's in now. The memory of what she went through with her baby daddy only makes her current choices more baffling and worrisome. She knows firsthand the kind of person he is, yet she's letting him back into her life. It's like watching her walk back into a burning building. The thought of her daughter potentially being exposed to that man again is unbearable. She deserves better. Alice deserves better. But she's so lost right now, so blinded by her pain and confusion, that she can't see it. It's like she's forgotten the horrors of her past and is willing to risk everything for a man who never deserved a second chance. All of this makes me fear for her even more. I told her that of all the things she's done recently, this was by far the worst. My voice was shaking with anger and disappointment as I laid it out for her. I couldn't believe she would ever speak to that man after everything he did to her, to us. She kept saying it was years ago, that he had changed, and that he wanted to meet his daughter one day. But that didn't matter to me. The scars he left, both physical and emotional, were still fresh in my mind, even if she chose to forget them. When she said he wanted to meet his daughter, something inside me snapped. I started screaming and yelling into the phone. So loud, I think I blew out my voice. "Are you out of your mind? After everything he did to you, to us, you're going to let him back into your life? Into your daughter's life?" I was beyond furious, my anger fueled by years of witnessing her pain and suffering because of that man. I told her I was done with her. I told her that if she got on that plane to Seattle, not to bother contacting me ever again. I hung up on her. She called back and texted once, but I ignored it. I didn't have the energy for her anymore. I just sat on the couch, crying all night while my husband held me. He didn't rub it in. He didn't give me an attitude. He just let me cry and told me he was sorry. Sorry that my best friend was making such destructive choices. Sorry that I was caught in the middle of this mess. Sorry that there was nothing he could do to fix it. I felt completely drained, emotionally and physically. The weight of my words and the finality of what I had said hung heavy in the air. This was the woman who had been my confidant, my rock, my sister, in every way that mattered. And now, I was watching her walk down a path that I knew would lead to nothing but more heartache and devastation. The realization that I might have lost her for good was almost too much to bear. I couldn't understand how Alice could be so blind, so willing to rewrite history for a man who had only ever brought her pain. The memories of helping her rebuild her life, of watching her grow stronger and more independent, now seemed distant and futile. It was as if all the progress she had made was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My husband's arms around me were the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. Then, this morning, Alice texted me. She said she was sorry for lying to me, but that she was a big girl now and could look after herself. Her words felt like a slap in the face, a dismissive wave of her hand as she brushed off both my concerns and our history. It was as if everything we had been through together, all the support I had given her, meant nothing. Her stubborn pride was leading her down a dangerous path, and there was nothing more I could do to stop it. I asked her again if she was still going to Seattle, just hoping that she might change her mind, that she might see reason and reconsider. But her reply was simple, unyielding. Yes. That one word sealed the deal. I felt a mix of anger and sadness as I blocked her number. It was over. With a heavy heart, I told Ken everything. He was upset, but not surprised. His eyes held a sadness that mirrored my own. He said he knew how close Alice and I had been, and he was sorry I'd lost my friend. His empathy, while small, was a comfort amid the turmoil. I told him I was sorry he'd lost his wife, the woman he had loved and supported, who had now drifted so far from him. He said, "You guys were right." I felt like an idiot. Maybe it's a little selfish of me, but I felt betrayed. I had invested so much into our friendship, stood by her side through thick and thin, only to watch her throw it all away. The sense of betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound that I wasn't sure would ever fully heal. Alice's decision to reconnect with the man who had caused her so much pain wasn't just a betrayal of our friendship. It was a betrayal of herself and her daughter. She was undoing all the progress she had made, and it was heartbreaking to witness. I felt powerless, knowing that I had done everything I could and still failed to save her from herself. The memories of our friendship, once a source of comfort and joy, now felt tainted by the recent events. Every laugh, every shared secret, every moment of support and understanding was overshadowed by her betrayal. It was a harsh reminder that sometimes, no matter how much you care for someone, you can't save them from their own choices. As I sat there processing the end of our friendship, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, disappointment, and a lingering sense of guilt. Had I done enough? Could I have done more? These questions haunted me, even though I knew the answers wouldn't change the outcome. Alice had made her choice, and now I had to live with mine. I had just lost a friend, a part of my life. My friend had lost his wife. And worst of all, a child had just lost her mother. No matter how challenging life becomes, there will always be someone willing to extend a helping hand, to guide you through your darkest times. Once you find such individuals, it is essential to cherish and maintain those relationships. Additionally, while work plays a vital role in our lives, it is crucial to balance professional responsibilities with family commitments. Your family is your sanctuary, a place of solace when external circumstances become turbulent. Failure to strike this balance may result in losing what you hold most dear. Prioritizing both your career and personal life is imperative for long-term fulfillment and stability. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.